Good morning, all. Welcome to our press event in Zurich at the headquarters of FIFA, and welcome to the many who are following us online. I should also say that there will be a recording available of this event, so if you're not able to stay right till the end, please email us and we'll be able to send you a recording of the whole event. We gathered here today because we have, as international legal experts, filed a official complaint with FIFA regarding the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia. We've done it through the human rights grievance mechanism that is a particular procedure set up by FIFA to receive any complaints in relation to a whole range of matters, but including human rights concerns in relation to any of their activities and events. For those of you who don't know, it's a portal that's set up where a complaint can be filed with supporting material and documentation. And then there's an internal procedure that is followed by FIFA to review the complaint, to seek any further representations, and then to make findings and recommendations as a result. We filed that complaint yesterday through that procedure, and we have received a formal acknowledgement that it has been received, and it is being considered as a first step to see whether it is within the competence of the grievance procedure. And then thereafter, they indicated, FIFA, that they would be in contact with us to move through the further stages. So we are underway. You might recall that last year we filed a report with FIFA, not through any complaints procedure. This was in May last year during the bidding process for the World Cup, where we highlighted a number of minimum human rights standards that we said should be considered by FIFA as part of the bidding process, that these should be met before the cup is awarded to Saudi Arabia. Some of these issues were discussed during the bidding process. A number of states, NGOs raised them, but as far as we are aware, none of them found their way into the final agreement to provide the World Cup to Saudi Arabia. No conditions were set. We were saying at least set certain conditions which should then be followed up. But none of those were there in the final agreement. Unfortunately, also, we never got any response to our report, even though we would also held a press event here in Zurich later on in the year. So that's what's spurred us to take the next step, to go to the next level of submitting this complaint, which essentially is saying that the concerns we raised, the minimum human rights standard concerns, weren't addressed properly in the bidding process. That's in violation of FIFA's human rights policy that's been in place since 2017. But more importantly, because the reality is, of course, now the World Cup will be held in Saudi Arabia, is in the period between now and the next 9 years, these minimum standards, and we're not talking about the whole host of human rights standards, but certain minimum ones to focus on, they have to be addressed by FIFA with Saudi Arabia in order for it to comply with its human rights policy. So far, we haven't seen any evidence of that. We're now nearly a half a year on. It may be that certain things are taking place internally, but none of that has been made public, that there is a clear plan to address a number of the core human rights issues that we have highlighted. And we are saying that that is a breach of your policy, that's the basis of the complaint. And we've put forward a number of constructive recommendations in our complaint about what practically needs to happen over the coming period. And that this should all be encapsulated in a very clear and transparent plan of action so that everyone can see what are the aims, what are we working towards. We've seen rather a lot of general pledges being made by FIFA, a lot of reports coming out that say matters are going to be looked at, but unfortunately nothing tangible as yet. So this is our main concern, that I know we're fairly early on in the process, there's still a long way to go, but it needs to begin now. The opportunity should not be missed to ensure that the World Cup is one that takes place in a human rights friendly environment, which is going to be best for the country, best for FIFA and for football worldwide. I'm now going to hand over to Professor Mark Pieth, who, as I think we all know, is one of the leading FIFA gurus on how FIFA operates and what its procedures should be. He was the founder of the Basel Institute on governance. He has been centrally involved, together with Stefan Wehrenberg, who will speak later, in putting this complaint together, and we are privileged to have him here today to talk about what we aim to do. And thereafter, I'll give a little bit more detail of what is in the complaint. It is available if anybody wants to get a copy of it, to study and to cite. Professor Pieth, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to see a few familiar faces here, people who have their own relationship to the world of football. Those who do not know me might remember that there was this independent governance committee between 2011 and roughly 2014, and we tried to reform FIFA, I must say, with some mixed success. That was basically my role that brought me close to the organization. Otherwise, I'm myself not a footballer. Now, turning to this initiative, we all know that Saudi Arabia is one of the most problematic countries regarding human rights. In that submission that you mentioned of last year, we had listed where we see problems and given examples. And you find them again in the complaint. I mean, you can list them as you want. The situation of women is highly problematic. The situation of migrant workers is simply awful. And when it comes to the justice system, I mean, the lack of independence is maybe the least of problems. You have arbitrary arrests, you have torture, you have death penalty still there, and you have even extrajudicial killings. So you have, I mean, this is probably the worst of the worst, if you want. And FIFA has given itself a quite impressive standard. This is very typical. I mean, FIFA, I remember in my time with FIFA, the group that I ultimately led, originally FIFA wanted Kofi Annan and Henry Kissinger to lead the group. They did something quite similar here. They got Professor Ruggie to write a fantastic policy. So there's no problem with the policy, except that the policy is not applied. It's not used when it comes to the bidding process. And that was the problem that we addressed when we were discussing with some of you in 2024. The choice of the hosting location, there they should have considered their own policy. And we're basically holding up a mirror, if you want, saying, look, why are you not applying the rules that you've given yourself? And we all remember that choice of location is, to say the least, highly irregular, the way it happened. First of all, you had two locations that were actually decided on at the same time, and that after we had actually, the organization had said, we will never do that again. We had a real problem with Russia and Qatar, and now they did it again. And they did it in a very strange way. They skipped democratic procedures entirely. So no Congress, or let's say the Congress was virtual after Corona, no need to do a virtual Congress. They skipped the discussion, they skipped the actual voting even. They voted in one go, both locations, by acclamation, by clapping hands. If you watch that film, 4 minutes is the length of it, and then everything is done and over. Maybe you will say, well, there have been law firms looking at the matters beforehand, and there have been audit firms accompanying the process. I must say, as a lawyer, I'm ashamed. You can buy lawyers and you can buy audit firms. Yeah, hired guns. Now, we are in a different stage now. The decision has been taken. The process foresees at least mitigative action. So it would be the duty of FIFA to talk to the country and try to mitigate the human rights difficulties that they're finding. But so far, we have not seen much of that at all. I mean, one of the problems that we have had is that UEFA and the European countries, they could have stood up and said, we are not going ahead along with this kind of procedure. We are not going along with this kind of country. We insist on our own rules. They have not done so. So the problem is they are, in a way, accomplice to what we're seeing here. And I think we should take them, remind them that they have a duty. To put it very bluntly, it's not good sportsmanship to cave in front of risk. So to be a coward is not sportsmanship. That's what I would say, where I see the problem. Now, 2 years ago, and this has nothing to do with what we are discussing here, I had suggested to Frankfurt Allgemeine that UEFA leaves FIFA and does their own World Cup. All the good footballers are playing in Europe anyhow. They could invite certain countries, Latin Americans, maybe some Africans, to join them and do their own World Cup. Boxing has several world champions. They could actually, and the reason why I'm saying this is because they are in on it. They are responsible, co-responsible for what is going on here. I heard this morning when reading the news that yesterday, apparently, they have for the first time actually stood up from their seat or not returned after the coffee break because they were insulted by the way they were treated by the now president of FIFA. But, well, maybe that is a hopeful start. But what I'm really insisting is UEFA they are part of it and they have a duty. I'll stop here and hand back for an explanation.
Thank you very much, Professor Pieth. We, of course, will have time at the end for questions about what is being said, but I just wanted to use the opportunity to give you a brief overview of what is in the complaint. As I said, there are copies available as well. This all started some time ago with our report. We had been asked by various victims of violations of human rights in Saudi Arabia to bring this to the fore. Many of them simply don't have a voice or are too afraid to speak out with such reports. And we have the privilege and the opportunity to be able to raise on their behalf and countless others what the realities are in Saudi Arabia at the moment. And as we emphasized when we did our first report, we recognize that FIFA can't change everything in a country like Saudi Arabia or other countries around the world. But there are certain basic things that can be done. And we highlighted 5 particular areas that had to be addressed. The first is freedom of expression and association, where so many people are detained simply for tweeting or opposing the government in some way. And many of them remain in detention, long sentences on vague charges. How is it possible to hold a World Cup in such an environment? We were emphasizing if persons go there, if fans tweet, is the same going to happen to them? But of course, we need to focus on those who are in detention. Very difficult to know the exact numbers, but they run into the thousands, including over 100 women who are in detention. The other area that we then emphasized was arbitrary arrests, mistreatment, and the death penalty. In just the few months up until now, up until May 2025, it's been reported that we've had 100 persons executed by death penalty sentences. An extraordinary number in that amount of time, and for not the most serious offences or offences where persons have had a fair trial. Also, the UN has found countless cases of arbitrary arrests and torture in detention. Then the third area was judicial independence, as Professor Pieth highlighted, the ability to be able to go to court and challenge what has happened to you. It's all centralized through the political system with no independent judges. Once again, of course, FIFA is not going to be able to reform the entire judiciary, but you have to be able to say there must, at a minimum, be appointment of judges independently, or the review of cases independently where persons say they've been arrested and treated unlawfully. Then the fourth area, very important, migrants' rights. You would have seen the reports that came out just recently from Human Rights Watch, based on widespread testimony of workers who have died in gruesome conditions, and where there's been a serious effort by the state to seek to avoid compensation, saying they're not work-related accidents, and failing to put in place proper mechanisms to investigate what has happened. I mean, these are not radical reforms. I mean, FIFA could simply say there has to be an independent body that investigates complaints made by migrant workers, and then if their cases are made out based on the evidence, no one is saying that you just compensate willy-nilly, but based on the evidence, then they should be properly compensated. Instead of saying, as I've seen in a number of responses from FIFA, that they have policies in place, that they are reforming with the assistance of Saudi Arabia and reviewing and considering, I mean, all of these general vague pledges. Instead of saying that, why not just say, we are going to establish an independent body to accept complaints of mistreatment from migrant workers, and there'll be a compensation fund set up. I mean, it seems to be that there's enough funding slushing around currently in Saudi Arabia to be able to do that without it affecting the proper functioning of the World Cup. In fact, it will enhance it. So, these are very basic steps that Human Rights Watch, Fair Square as well, has just brought out a report. I have copies of it here highlighting exactly the same problems. And this is based on victim accounts, witness testimony, where they have on the ground gathered this information about what is going on. It's not just bringing out general complaints, but it's based on concrete evidence and making very specific recommendations about things that could change from tomorrow. And then finally, the area of women's rights, where we have noted that there have been some efforts to this is what we put in our complaint, to improve the situation, but all falling far short of what would be required under international human rights law. And also what's very concerning is people who are speaking out about the need for more women's rights are themselves being targeted and put in prison. And we've highlighted a number of cases in our report where, even though recently you would have seen some people were released, there was a figure of about 44 reported, still thousands remain in custody and more are being detained if they speak out. So the problem that one really faces is where people are trying to raise these issues. Fortunately, we have the space to do it here in Zurich, but where people are trying to do that there, they are being hounded and clamped down. And none of that is being spoken about by FIFA. A simple recognition of that and a condemnation of it. I mean, we've seen recently with President Trump and the president of FIFA visiting Saudi Arabia with the Crown Prince, huge celebrations about what is going on in the country, looking forward to the World Cup, all getting very high on the power and the profit of it, but not a single mention of these basic cases. And it doesn't look like they were being prioritized in any way. And that's where FIFA can step in as the independent body running this. They should not be too close to any of these politicians, saying we have certain policies that we have to stand up for, and then engage with the stakeholders, including, most importantly, Saudi Arabia, to improve the situation. There are constructive pathways that can be followed, and that's what we are saying in our complaint. They haven't been so far, but they should be. There are plenty of bodies that are there to assist in inputting into this, and there should be effective, independent monitoring of what is going on. They can't be the prosecutor, judge, and the jury. It can't all be done by only FIFA internally and Saudi Arabia. And there can't be the statement made, as has happened a few times, saying we trust each other for it to happen. There has to be somebody on the outside. And there has to be that independence to give it credibility. So that's another recommendation we're making, asking for it to be considered in the right spirit. It's a spirit of trying to resolve this in a productive way and in the spirit of FIFA's own human rights policy. So that's, in summary, what is there in our complaint. We'll take any questions about that if there are. But before that, I do want to hand over to Stefan Wehrenberg, who's been part of the report as well, based here in Zurich, for his comments. And then after that, we'll have a short pre-recorded statement from Abdullah Al-Oda. I'll introduce that as soon as Stefan is finished. Thank you.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I love football, and I'm in favor of having the World Championship in football for men in Saudi Arabia. But there are also rules. There are not only rights, and I think they should follow the rules. It's bringing a big international event to Saudi Arabia, so they should also follow the international rules. The international rules, these are the UN Charter, the international human rights, and there are even the FIFA policy on human rights. So I think it's time for Saudi Arabia to not only get international events, but also follow the international rules. It's also time for FIFA not only to have the events, but also to follow their rules, their human rights policy. Speaking about time, I don't know if you know what happened yesterday. So the FIFA president, he was traveling with Mr. Trump in the Middle East, and had the FIFA Congress at the same time in Paraguay, and there were hundreds of delegates waiting for the FIFA president for 3.5 hours. So Gianni Infantino is coming from Switzerland. In Switzerland, we are proud of our watches. We call ourselves the country of watches. So for us, it's very impolite that the FIFA president is not following the time and not looking on his Swiss watch. There is this saying, punctuality is the politeness of the kings. I would not say that the FIFA president is a king, but I would say that punctuality is the politeness even of the FIFA president. But it's not only about punctuality, it's also about following the rules, their own laws. And so I'm saying again, it's time for them in Saudi Arabia to follow the international human rights standards. It's time for FIFA, the FIFA president, to help them to improve the levels of the human rights on the international standards. So it's not only the politeness of the FIFA president to follow the human rights rules or human rights standards, it's the human rights standards, it's a duty of the FIFA president to uphold. And I call him on this duty. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stefan. I'm going to ask now that we move over to Abdullah Al-Oda's statement. He's a Saudi exile living in Washington. It's very early for him there, but he wanted to join. He sent us this statement. He's been campaigning for a long time outside of Saudi Arabia for human rights in his country. His father, Salman Al-Oda, unfortunately, is a stalwart detainee. He's been in prison since September 2017 in Saudi Arabia. He was kept in solitary confinement for a long time and faces the death penalty, which I emphasized early on. So I'm going to ask that his statement is played next.
Thank you, Rodney, and all the participants in this event. My name is Abdullah Al-Oda. I'm the Senior Director for Counter and Authoritarianism at Middle East Democracy Center, MEDC, a non-profit organization based in DC. And my intervention here is to speak about the lack of non-biased and fair assessment of the human rights situation that FIFA used in order to award Saudi Arabia the World Cup in 2034. And as a Saudi activist, as a son of someone who still languishes in jail, as a relative of many members of my family who are banned from traveling, as a friend to many activists who languish in jail, as a friend to Jamal Khashoggi, who was killed and dismembered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018 in an operation ordered and orchestrated by no other than the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself, who is going to basically oversee all the operations of hosting the World Cup in 2034 as part of his own vision 2030 that was ostensibly to diversify the Saudi economy, which, by the way, did nothing other than taking money from the citizens' pockets and putting it into lavish spending on sports and transactions that does not help the country, but rather protects the throne for the Crown Prince himself and protects his own way to more power. So my intervention is basically to say that it is a shame on FIFA to turn a blind eye to Saudi violations, atrocities, and all of the crimes committed by the Saudi government, including the things that I mentioned, and the intervention in Yemen that actually created the worst humanitarian crisis in the contemporary world. And the Saudi interventions in many other countries that led to strife, that pushes for basically undermining basic principles of democracy, democratic values, and protection of human rights. Look at the Saudi government and its treatment of the migrant workers, for example, to see how the World Cup is going to actually help and facilitate and enable Saudi Arabia with basically enslaving a group of people in Saudi Arabia in order to build stadiums, in order to make the World Cup happen in Saudi Arabia. I think not taking any of these things into account is not just a lack of knowledge. It's definitely not a lack of information, because all of these things are provided and we'll be happy to provide even more. And also it's not a lack of legal venues for such things. And the complaint provided and presented by the lawyers today and talked about and explained right here is just part of this process, is an example of how there is no lack of knowledge, there is no lack of reports or reporting on the issues in Saudi Arabia, human rights, democracy, intervention and support, Saudi support for basically atrocities around the world, and also the Saudi involvement in a phenomenon that we documented and we document all the time and we observe, called transnational repression, TNR, which means the Saudi long arm of reaching outside its own borders in order to suppress dissent, in order to go after activists, in order to try to shut down and suffocate not just the public sphere inside Saudi Arabia, but go after those who speak critically of Saudi Arabia outside Saudi Arabia. And we have seen that not just in the killing of Khashoggi, that of course known and documented by everybody, but also in the, for example, Saudi attempt to assassinate Iyad al-Baghdadi in Norway, in Europe. In the Saudi attempt to assassinate Saad al-Jabri in Canada, in hacking cell phones of Madawi Rashid in the UK, Umar Abdulaziz in Canada, and in going after dissidents electronically, virtually, physically, and all means available to Saudi Arabia. So again, I want to remind everybody that this is not a lack of knowledge, of reporting, of enough process, but rather a lack of will. It's basically an intentional and deliberate turning a blind eye to all Saudi atrocities for the sake of money that Saudi Arabia has and offers to those who basically turn the blind eye to. This is part of what we call the sports washing. It's whitewashing the crimes of killing Khashoggi, killing Yemeni children, women, and school teachers, of going after dissidents like me, my family, my friends, and many others, in order to get money. That's basically the practice of whitewashing the crime of Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks very much. It's very interesting what Abdullah highlighted there about the cross-border efforts to clamp down on any dissent as well. It's interesting when you fill out the complaint form on the portal, you have to say which is the country or countries where the complaint took place, and it only really allows you to put in one country. They say they're in the main country, and when we were filling it out, it was quite difficult to decide. Okay, well, it's obviously Saudi Arabia, but there's so many other places as well where persons who've escaped, like Abdullah, are still tracked down. I've acted for many clients, even in the UK, where they have been followed there, even though they managed to get out, not feeling safe for the things that they are saying abroad. And of course, we saw this most explicitly with the Jamal Khashoggi killing, which took place in Istanbul. I'm going to hand over now to those here for questions and online. The one last thing that I did want to say was from the organization Sanad. That's an NGO based in the UK. It stands for Standing Against Nefarious and Arbitrary Detentions. They do a lot of work on precisely what Abdullah was highlighting, those who are detained in Saudi Arabia, but also how those detentions then affect other family members who are abroad. Very often, and they highlight this extensively in their research, people are detained there in order to try and silence people who are abroad into making any critical statements about Saudi Arabia. And the one case that they wanted me to highlight is that of Aida Al-Ghamdi, who's a 66-year-old mother, and her son Adil, who are both currently detained in Saudi Arabia. They've been detained since March 2018 in the quite notorious Damnam prison. And her other son, Abdullah, is in the United Kingdom. He's been quite a prominent activist over the years there. But they are both being held, it is thought, because of his work abroad, and using that as a blackmail to either get him to come back or to silence him. So, these are the tactics that we are talking about, and which, in our view, it's simply impossible for FIFA to turn a blind eye to and just say, well, it's business as usual. And this is the central thrust of our complaint. We're saying, we have to wake up to this. It can't just go on as though nothing is happening. And they are very concrete, even though they might seem quite small steps that can be taken, where it could make a huge difference to the lives of ordinary people in Saudi Arabia and their relatives abroad as well. So thank you very much for attending, but I do want to, we have enough time for any questions, and if there are questions online, they can be sent to me. I will read them out. I expect there are some coming through there already. But any questions here or online? Yes. Any comments?
They're happy that football is exposed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they are in the shadow and they can do what they want. So I think
So,
it's worth to try.
yeah. Yes, but I think you gave the answer already yourself. Football is the most prestigious of the sports. So it's like obvious to call them, let's say, first. But it's not, let's say, the path to do whatever they want for the others.
But I do think it's very important to highlight the others as well, and that has been done in taking up other cases, and certainly with the Hatinja Cengiz and Jamal Khashoggi case, there were a number of steps taken then when we were involved and assisting in that to focus on golf, for example, and contacting Greg Norman directly and saying, are you really going to take all this money and not raise any questions about that particular case or others? It doesn't have necessarily the same resonance across the world, but within those communities it does. So I think it is very important, and wherever we've been able to, that has been done, or we encourage other people to do it.
I think Guido has a point here. It's really a much broader problem that we're facing, and football is, as you say, it's prominent, but there's only so much you can do at once. But I think you're perfectly right.
But the same applies to the economy, I think the banks and Swiss banks and British banks and American banks are very happy that somebody is putting the finger on sports, so they can go on with business as usual, or even more than usual.
Yes.
That's the case now. There's also an imbalance between sports and economy, the rest of the economy.
Yes.
I think we should not forget that.
I agree. I always emphasize one needs to multitask. You need to look at a lot of things at the same time, and they're often very connected. And no one is saying that sport shouldn't be allowed to develop and thrive. And if there's funding to go into it, so much the better. But it has to be taken hand in hand with ensuring proper respect and human rights standards. And it's not one or the other. The two can take place together. And I don't know why one is only always focused on, probably because that makes more profit. The other is harder work and doesn't necessarily generate immediate profits for the sport, but it's what uplifts the nation and ultimately will help the economy as well.
Jérôme has.
One remark. I've read your documents many times, and I may have overseen that, but I've seen barely no mention of the religious rights. As you know, there is an estimate of between 10 to 20% of the Saudi population who belongs to the Shia school of Islam. In the eastern provinces, which are mostly the oil-producing provinces, the percentage goes very high. And you surely remember what happened in Bahrain. You probably also know that in Korea, neighboring country, there is a high percentage of population that is from Shia schooling. If you listen to the names of the persons who have been arrested, most of them are Shia with the names they have. And as far as the connection, human rights, as you know, in the human rights regulation, you have the right to believe or not to believe, and to change religions, and beyond the fact that the minorities are not respected. In the case of football, there was a second division club in the Saudi called As-Safa, which is coming from the eastern provinces, where there was a lot of issues because the fans, Shia fans, were singing Shia slogans, and there was a turmoil I don't want to elaborate. So I feel that in your documents and your approach, the religious dimension is missing. And I understand some of the people who oppose the situation do not raise a religious issue because it would add another layer of problematic problems. But when you look at the names of the people who are arrested, they're obviously Shia. So I think that part is missing because it has a connection with football as well. It's not human rights because someone built a stadium and falls from a crane. It's inside the stadium in the eastern provinces, you have some issues regarding religious minorities.
I think this is another really very valid point, Jérôme, that the list is much longer of challenges, and one is you're right that one hesitates to raise the religious issue or to address the religious minority issue, maybe wrongly. Yeah, this I think you're rightly pointing out there is a huge problem, and it's for the people concerned by it. It is very, very risky, very dangerous. Again, you have extrajudicial killings in the extreme case that we would have to have a look at. So our list is not complete.
No, but maybe you're right. We should seek to include more, and we can. This is just the start of the process. We hope we'll be able to make more representations, but we were trying to focus on just a core. It's always difficult then to select, but ones that could be hopefully immediately addressed. But there are many other issues, and I think we ourselves need to make sure that we keep sight of that.
I think you wanted to come in.
Just to know, I mean, as you said, there was no feedback by FIFA last year on the submission. What makes you hopeful that this time it's different? If we can assume there won't be any feedback again, why do you put so much effort into this?
I don't know if you want to say something, but I've heard from many colleagues or so, why the hell are you doing this? You know that they're not going to answer. For me, this is maybe not the real point. What we're trying to do is we're holding up a mirror. We're hoping that there will be an answer, but we're using their own concepts and their own proceedings to actually show a broader public that this is an issue and it should be taken seriously. So there is a hope. It's not that we're saying they won't answer anyhow. That's not the approach. But it's the people we are talking to are just as much the wider public.
And the useful thing about this complaints procedure is that it's different to just submitting a report generally. They have to now, according to their own rules, respond to it. And it was quite encouraging to wake up this morning and see that email from FIFA saying, we've got your complaint, and setting out what the procedure is, what the steps are. You will hear from us. We have your email. So there was somebody on the other side for the first time. And of course, they're going to have to look at their competence to deal with it, but at least they'll have to make a decision about that. And then we're hoping that it'll go further. It might be that we end up getting a general response like the one I see Human Rights Watch got from FIFA. Our whole point is that it shouldn't be like this. It should be more concrete. But then we can build on that. I know as a result of this response, Human Rights Watch are now taking the action further. So, as you engage, it becomes more and more difficult to slip away. You have to eventually get down to the brass tacks of it.
There's maybe one more aspect. The fact that somebody is powerful and won't listen to you anyhow, it should not be a reason not to do something. This is something we probably have to think about when we are confronted with the Trump administration at the moment. We have to be bold enough to say what we believe.
FIFA is acting, let's say, as a representative of football. Football is a sport for all, for everybody. So in their role, FIFA should also take care for all and everybody. And they have the rules for it. So I think one day they have to come down and really fulfill their duties to keep up their own standards.
I think it also helps to get states who should be speaking out more to do so. If they see more of these reports coming out, that the context is growing for the need for change. So what we saw yesterday in Paraguay with the UEFA states, hopefully this will also prompt countries like Switzerland, Norway, others to do more internally. And that's what we've said. Use whatever means you can internally to change the situation.
Now, I think you had some questions online.
Any other questions here? There were a few online. How does Saudi Arabia respond to accusations of sports washing? That was asked online. I mean, I've seen them say they agree with it. Yes, we are doing that. We are trying to promote our country through sport. So they have tackled it head on, but the real underlying problem is that they haven't actually changed any of the complaints that are made about how sport is covering up
they
those
wouldn't
violations.
call it sports washing, obviously.
No, they call it the promotion of their country, and they say you shouldn't stop any country from doing that. That's interfering. There's another one here. Do you think international players can play a role in raising awareness, putting on pressure?
I firmly believe, that international players are not just following the powerful, full stop. There is, people who have a position in society. They typically they would speak up. I mean, it sounds a bit naive, but we shouldn't generalize what we're seeing at the moment with this tendency towards autocracy at the moment. It is true that the current administration of FIFA is piggybacking onto the worldwide tendency towards autocracy, but I'm seeing a lot of representatives. I'm thinking of Madame Lagarde or so on. There are people who have self-esteem, and they would not just look away systematically.
More online. Do you know if other complaints have been filed regarding the Saudi World Cup. As far as we know, no other complaints like this through this mechanism have been filed. That's why we thought it was an important step to take. Of course, we do know of legal actions being brought by certain trade unions based on jurisdiction in Switzerland. And also many other bodies have filed reports with FIFA, like Human Rights Watch, like Fair Square, a number of others. But using this complaints mechanism in this way, we think is the first time it's been done for this particular World Cup. So we're hoping that in and of itself will generate some specific attention and the need for a response.
I believe the mechanism of the OECD on the guidelines for multinationals is being used by trade unions. That's what I've been seeing. So different mechanism offered by the OECD.
And perhaps following on from that, another question online. If you don't hear from FIFA on this complaint, what's the next step? Are there any legal avenues available? Turn to the Swiss lawyers.
Yeah, that's a question for you.
So it's a little bit tricky question because it's a FIFA internal mechanism. According to this internal mechanism, they have to answer. So I expect at least this time they will answer, but they haven't answered the last time, so I have no guarantee for it. But I still hope that they start to follow their own rules, because otherwise I would expect that the European countries or UEFA, they are not just walking out of the FIFA Congress for a symbolic sign. I think they will also tell the FIFA headquarters, now you can't stay away from all your duties.
There's maybe one thing to add. You know, one reason why we're quite insistent that the country associations have a role. They are the members of the association. So talking of the legal framework in Switzerland, FIFA is an association, and those members, they have standing to go to court if something is wrong, is amiss. We as citizens don't have that kind of standing. We are not members of the association.
But can individuals take up actions? I understand there are possibilities for that.
Yes, there are possibilities, but let's say not within the FIFA framework. This is, as Mark said, it's like only for the member associations. So it would be, let's say, the public in a certain country putting their football association under certain pressure, and then the football association would call FIFA to move.
But I have been asked this question a few times, and I also tried to emphasize that we have to go step by step. We're in this process now. It's there to avoid legal action and litigation, which can become messy, even though for lawyers it can be interesting. It's never the best way to resolve a dispute. So this is a grievance procedure that's specifically set up to avoid going to court. So we're hoping that it can work, even if it takes a bit of time. We are here, we're emphasizing to assist further, to give representations. There are other organizations that are ready to feed in. So let's use the procedure that has been set up by FIFA itself to deal with these problems and not look at other avenues. But of course, that can always be done further down the line. But let's not jump ahead and focus on that. Let's look at the genuine opportunities that exist now.
Let me ask you a straightforward question. As phases of this international campaign, are you afraid of your own safety, or would you not mind traveling to Saudi Arabia?
I'm not afraid at all, because I say it again, I'm not against the World Cup in Saudi Arabia. It's a good chance for football to go to the Middle East, but it doesn't bring only the football, it brings also part of culture. It brings as part of culture the international human rights, and I just expect them to follow the standards, and I don't see a good reason why they shouldn't.
I think the point at the moment is that we're saying it's a wasted opportunity. You could have, when deciding. You could have had a list of minimal standards, and since you've not done it then, you still could do it now. You are still, it's not ruled out. So I think it's a good point that you're making. We're not saying this country should not get it, but there is a minimum of that one should require the country to do.
I have a question. We live in an era where there is more and more news manipulation, trolls, fake news, and so on. Because you are clever observers of the situation, in particular Mark of the sport organization. In the latest World Cup, which took place in Qatar, neighboring countries of Qatar developed some campaigns against Qatar, paying lawyers, PR companies. I don't want to mention the countries which did that. We are in an era now where criticized governments and states are very expensive PR companies to propagate their own propaganda in our democracies. And of course, I don't want to be perceived as inconvenient. And we have also cases where the governments responsible of a particular action have financed NGOs and organizations to try to pretend now we have to solve the problem. I don't want to give names. I think it would be, and it's my question, who is financing your campaign? Do you have any government behind? Are you supported by any structure which could question your good sense and common cause? Because that's a very important point, considering what happened in the past years and what's happening, for example, in some countries where the countries in the region finance PR campaigns and PR companies. I think that's my question. Can you, maybe you do that pro bono, and I would say adds up. That I would like to know a little more about that.
No, there's certainly no government behind what we are doing. We have some limited funding from some of the victims who I mentioned at the beginning have asked us to bring this forward. They haven't wanted to be named directly in our report, but some of them and some of their NGOs to cover the basic expenses of having press events like this and being able to continue this. But it's a very limited budget. I hope we will be able to get more support going forward, but it'll always be based on those people who are directly affected by the violations.
I can answer the question very directly. I'm just doing it pro bono. For me, it's just like it's the matter it counts, and I'm convinced that it's a rightful and just matter to ask them to follow the human rights standards.
So far, there is only one single country which is opposing the FIFA policy openly. This is Norway. Since years. It's a lady. All the rest you can forget. But do you have a hope that you can join some other countries in this?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying. I think this is also...
What's the Football Association, for example?
Yes. No, not clear at the moment, but there are, I think, potential options there to try and get more countries like those in the UK and others to be more outspoken. That's why I said at the beginning, doing these reports is also there to try and encourage those countries, to have the detailed information to go forward with. Norway is the only one. I don't know about Switzerland. There are many that are on the fence and seeing how it unfolds. So absolutely, we would want this to be a catalyst for more countries to be doing whatever they can, even if it's behind the scenes.
Yesterday, the FA chairwoman walked out with the
Yes, I saw that in the media, which was an encouraging sign.
Yeah, we may need your help. Jérôme, you have a good relation to Norway, so... Do we have more questions online?
Otherwise, we'll... yes, there's another question online. There's no doubt that the World Cup in Saudi Arabia will have an environmental impact. Is this also something you are taking into consideration?
It's, let's say, it's another very good question. the problem, the list of problems is far longer than what we have put before FIFA so far. And again, FIFA also has considered environmental issues. There are also texts about environmental challenges that they should be considering. We, from our side, have put some things on the table and said this is central, but there are other such issues.
Yes.
Absolutely clear. Yeah. But there's only so much you can do at one point, I think.
I mean, we had hoped that there'd be perhaps more specialist reports on issues like that coming out from other bodies. And we are, in doing this, in contact with a lot of different groupings. So it's certainly one that we've thought of, and it's been highlighted again, which we should include. We have tried to, say, focus on a core, but all of these are important. And I would hope that would be another aspect of it, because it could be one that draws in a wider, a new audience, and gets them also then to focus on other issues in Saudi Arabia. Let me see if there's anything else online. No, I think those are the last questions. Any more here? Otherwise, we will wrap up and thank you, everyone, for attending here in person and all those online. We will have a recording of this event. We've got our complaint as well, and we're available for any questions afterwards.
Has everybody got a complaint who wants one of those present, or also?
Yes, we can certainly arrange that. There's also our emails or an email address on the invitation, which you can send requests to. But otherwise, we've got copies here, and any questions can be followed up with us or online. We're available for interviews on this at any point. And of course, we'll keep you updated as this develops. We might, if we're able to, have further updates, events, hoping to make further representations as well, and remaining positive no matter what.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.